What people don't understand is that regardless of what people think about him as a politician, the his aims in or his strategy in prosecuting this war, in attempting to defeat completely the Hamas as a military force, and attempting to completely defeat Hezbollah as a military force, and to neutralize the threat from Iran, has the support of the overwhelming
Yeah.
majority of Israelis.
It's a year since the October the 7th attacks where Hamas killed 1,000 Israelis, 1,200, 251 more were taken hostage. A year where Israel has taken on its enemies in response. Just this morning, there have been huge explosions in southern Beirut. Where does Israel go now? Does it need to take the fight all the way to Tehran? Or is there a way of pulling back now Hamas and Hezbollah have been damaged? Two views now from Israeli politicians. First up, Yair Golan, leader of Israel's The Democrats Party and former Deputy Chief of General Staff of the Israel Defense Forces. Yair, good morning to you.
Good morning.
A year ago today, you put your uniform back on to help Israel. How do you... Well, take us back to that day itself, and then we'll work out how the year has passed.
Well, I can tell you, it was the most horrible day I ever experienced in my whole life. And I think I saw a lot. I fought in Lebanon, I fought in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. And nothing could be compared to the atrocities, to the horrific scene at that, particular day. I had this terrible opportunity to pass through the Nova Festival location, and it was a massacre scene. And I think that people who didn't see it probably don't understand the magnitude of this horrific day.
Do you think that magnitude of that day has led in the end under Netanyahu to a disproportionate response, or are you happy over the last year that the response has remained proportionate to what was suffered on October the 7th?
I think that this notion that we keep some sort of proportions, this is very strange notion. For many years we have tried to keep this proportionality, but it didn't work. It really didn't work. And therefore I think there is no other method but to say loud and clear, Israel won't allow terror, armies of terror along its borders. This is totally unacceptable. We have no intention to live with such a threat as a matter of, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And the terrible fact that our enemies are willing to use civilians as human shields. This cannot save them from, observing the full impact of the IDF and the Israeli state. And from the minute they declare war on Israel by such a brutal attack.
Yeah.
So this is totally unacceptable. And I can tell you more than that. Along my adult life, I fought a lot against Hezbollah. And Hezbollah threatened and still threatening, the Israeli civilian population along the border, along the northern part of Israel, for years. And we have lived with it. And now I think we need to say this is unacceptable.
Yeah,
and the fact that in 2006 there was a UN resolution 1701 that instruct the Lebanese government not to allow Hezbollah presence south of the Litani River. And we know that there is Hezbollah presence south of the Litani River and even along our northern border.
Yeah.
This is totally unacceptable.
And this is the sort of line in the sand that you feel has been drawn in the last year. Interesting view there about proportionality. It's impossible, and he's really saying, Yair Golan there, to be proportionate in the face of what happened on October the 7th. Not everyone would agree with that, but that's an argument coming from the leader of Israel's The Democrats Party, used to be in the IDF.
Listening to that was Sharren Haskel from the National Unity Party. Her party joined Benjamin Netanyahu's government after the October 7th last year, but left in March. Sharren, a year on, thank you for joining us. Is Israel safer and more secure after a year of military action?
Well, it's a good question, and we're debating almost every day. I mean, look, the most of the military threat of Hezbollah has been dismantled. But one of the problem is that, of Hamas, most of the military capability of Hamas has been disabled. But civilianly, Hamas still holds all the points of power. And through those points of power, by the way, they're holding it through UNRWA mainly, they are capable of controlling and indoctrinating the entire Gazan population. And by indoctrinating them and radicalizing them, they are capable of building an army of terror, recruiting terrorists to continue and do these activities. So from a military point of view, we have dismantled most of Hamas' capability at this point. If we look 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they can still rebuild that capability. And that's why we have to make sure that Hamas doesn't hold the power over the people.
Always
Gaza.
going to be a challenge of whether you could, with military force, defeat an ideology. That was true a year ago as it is today.
Well, it's not that we're trying to defeat the ideology, because radical Islam, you can't really completely eliminate it. There are three main powers like Iran who keeps on pushing it. There's groups like ISIS and Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab. Radical Islam is spreading all around the world. But the question is how much military capability they actually hold and how much power they hold. Same with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a long arm of Iran that is meant to spread radical Islam around the world. But Hezbollah is not just an army. Hezbollah is also a political party. They also hold power in the Lebanese government. So it's important to understand that you cannot, you can't eradicate completely radical Islam, especially when it's part of a side of the Islamic religion. So you can't eliminate it. But the question is how much power they hold and how much military capability they hold. Our goal is to make sure that surrounding Israel, they have the least armed capability as possible. And obviously, we have to make sure that they hold the least power, governmental power, that they can.
Sharren, thank you very much for your time. Sharren Haskel from the National Unity Party, talking about Iran, what everyone is anticipating to come soon. Israelis and Iranians bracing themselves for a planned and expected retaliation for Tehran's ballistic missile attack that happened last Tuesday.
The Times' long-standing columnist Melanie Phillips has spoken to us regularly as part of our 9 o'clock panel over the past year. We're always glad to have her. She spends much of her year living in Israel and has always brought us an inside view of what it's like for people who live there. We can speak to her again this morning as we look back on October the 7th, of course, 1 year on. Melanie, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What does it feel like in Jerusalem today?
Well, today is a very somber day, a day of great anguish and grief. It's not simply a day of commemorating the atrocities of October 7, when, as you know, more than 1,200 people were murdered, Israelis were murdered, and several hundred taken hostage into Gaza, and about 100 still remain. We don't know if they are dead or alive. But it's not simply a matter of commemorating something that happened a year ago, terrible as that was. This is a grief and a trauma that continues in this very small and very tightly knit society every day. There are young men and women, reservists in the Israel Defense Forces on the front in Gaza and now mainly in Lebanon, on the northern front. They are people's, children, grandchildren, nephews, nieces, and so on. And every few days, I'm afraid, more of them die. Or are returning to Israeli hospitals having lost limbs. It is a terrible continuing tragedy. And of course, the hostages are still there. We don't know, as I say, whether they are dead or alive. We do very, very strongly suspect and have good evidence that those who are still there are likely to be continuing to be extremely ill-treated, starved, abused. We don't know what's happening to them, but we know from the testimony of those who've come out the kind of conditions that they're held in. So this is a trauma that continues from that point of view, from the point of view of the hostages, from the point of view of the war that's going on. And what people, I think, even very well-meaning people who will share in this grief and horror of the day don't fully realize that Israel is really under siege in a war that is being conducted on at least 7 fronts. It's not simply war in Gaza, war in Lebanon. This is part of a 7-front war waged ultimately by Iran. And that is the problem that has to be dealt with. And that's what the Israeli public wants to see dealt with soon.
And is there a tank? I mean, it's interesting that I wonder whether the mood towards the government has changed over the last few weeks, because the aims of the war post October the 7th were to bring the hostages back. That's not really happened, or certainly not entirely happened, and to destroy Hamas, which clearly hasn't happened because Hamas was still firing rockets into Israel yesterday. But there seems to be a shift towards Lebanon and therefore towards Iran even more in the last couple of weeks. Has your mood changed about the success or otherwise of the Israeli government? Has the mood of people around you changed?
I think the mood has changed. The mood shifted quite dramatically, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago, when there was a string of spectacular successes by the IDF in Lebanon. You will recall the exploding pages, the complete elimination of the high command of the Radwan force, that is the terrorist high command of Hezbollah, in one missile strike, and then the assassination, the successful targeting of Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's actual chief. So there is no leadership left among Hezbollah. And that happened in the course of a couple of weeks. And that restored the Israelis' belief and faith in their intelligence service and their military high command in pulling off acts of supreme, quite frankly, military genius that the world never saw before, could never imagine could have taken place in that way. And it restored a sense of deterrence, not so much, well, I was going to say deterrence. I'll come back to that in a moment, perhaps. But it restored a sense that has been missing since October 7, because one of the most shattering things about the October 7 atrocities was that Israel is supposed to be the refuge in a world which is hostile, the place where Jews can feel absolutely safe. Because although it's surrounded by enemies and has been at war ever since it was founded, it is protected by a powerful army. And that was asleep on the job on the day, with a tremendous failure of intelligence. And that has been a tremendous psychic blow to Israel. So that was restored. That confidence was restored, at least partially, in the last couple of weeks. But what people, again, I think outside Israel don't understand, especially people for whom Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, is a figure of loathing, and many people loathe him. But what people don't understand is that regardless of what people think about him as a politician, his aims or his strategy in prosecuting this war, in attempting to defeat completely the Hamas as a military force, and attempting to completely defeat Hezbollah as a military force, and to neutralize the threat from Iran, has the support of the overwhelming majority of Israelis. This is what the Americans in particular don't understand. They think, Netanyahu is doing all this, waging this war in order to stay in office. This is, to put it mildly, shallow and completely out to lunch.
He's a person. It's useful to know that, because I think that many people have very strong views on Netanyahu, Melanie, and the views of people in Israel towards him is actually so crucial when we consider what's going to happen in the months to come. Melanie, great to speak to you. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
That's Melanie Phillips there from The Times.